Okay, good evening all, and welcome to the Tuesday, April 2021 business meeting of the Board of Education. I need a motion to call this meeting to order. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I understand we have some help here tonight, Boy Scouts, so it's up to you guys.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For any of those who aren't familiar with the emergency exits, they're located in the rear and over here through the kitchen. I need approval, I need a motion for the order of agenda, please.
Motion.
I need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to the clerk's report with Christine.
Thank you. We will accept the minutes of the meeting. Be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the minutes of the business meeting of March 9, 2021.
I need a motion.
Motion.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Public comment speakers will be recognized who wish to address the board on agenda items only. I think we're a little early for that, but, okay.
No comment.
We will start with our presentations and reports, and I think we'll start with video.
Yes, we have a video for our Student of the Month.
Into everything she does, both academically and personally. We are incredibly lucky to have Daniela in our third grade class this year. We cannot wait to see all of her accomplishments in the future. After college, Daniela wants to come back to Hampton Bays Elementary School as a second grade teacher. We look forward to having you join our team. We're proud to have nominated Daniela for March Student of the Month. There is no one who deserves it more. Congratulations, Daniela. It is my pleasure to introduce Hampton Bays Middle School Student of the Month for March, Jada.
Student of the Month for March, Jada Hernandez Valle. Jada is a 7th grade student and a member of our Big East team. Jada? There you go. The Big East team proudly nominates Jada for her hard work in class and the grades that she's earned and how she's worked so hard to maintain her achievement in class. She is a model student and displays the qualities of character and courtesy towards others. Jada's team of teachers look forward to seeing amazing progress continue during her academic career. Jada enjoys the challenge of working with numbers and solving problems in her math class. She's most appreciating the time she has in class with her friends. Outside of the school day, Jada likes spending time with her family, relaxing. While she's unsure of life after high school, Jada would like to do something that helps people. Jada has enjoyed reading the book Incantation as a part of our 7th grade English curriculum and highly recommends we read this book about friendship, faith, and fairness. When asked to share advice for students who are new to HBMS, Jada said, "It's normal to be nervous, but to make sure to seek out friends, focus on learning, and enjoy middle school." Congratulations, Jada, on your accomplishment as Student of the Month. Hampton Bays Middle School is very proud of you.
Good evening, Board of Ed trustees and Mr. Clemenson. It is an honor and a privilege to present the High School Student of the Month, Samantha Rivera Adriano. Samantha is a 9th grader here at Hampton Bays High School and has earned a very impressive grade point average of 99.23, placing her on Presidential Honor Roll. Samantha's teachers had some incredibly kind words that I'd like to share regarding this honor. Ms. Bishop says, though quiet, her work ethic shines through her artwork. She's open for feedback with her artwork and doesn't hesitate to ask questions. She doesn't settle for what she gets as an initial grade, asking what she can do to get her grade closer to 100 each and every time. Okay? Mr. Fotopoulos reports that Samantha is a great kid. She's conscientious and diligent, and she's always on task and always turns in quality work. Mr. Gill reports that she's a great student that is always striving to do her best. She is very cooperative with her peers and serves as a role model for the rest of the class. In Spanish with Ms. Moore reports that Samantha is a very dedicated and self-motivated student. She's a young lady who is always happy to participate in class on both remote and in-person learning days. Samantha's voice is heard with enthusiasm. Her impeccable effort is reflected in everything she does. Her English teacher, Mrs. Boyle, reports that Samantha is the type of student who will redo an assignment that was graded as a 92 to make it a 100. She consistently puts forth her best effort. Ms. Schofield had a lot to say, and she reports that Samantha is one of the hardest working students she's ever had the pleasure of teaching. I often refer to her work as pieces of art because she's extremely neat and organized. She is constantly raising the bar for herself and those around her. Samantha shows up to class each day with an "I'm ready to learn" mindset, and it shows in her grades. In all, Samantha is making us proud every single day. She aspires to attend college with the goal of becoming a doctor. When COVID is over, she's looking forward to participating on our soccer team. And as you can see, we're dealing here with a young lady that is very talented and motivated, and she's going to make us all very proud in the years to come. Thank you, and congratulations, Samantha.
Congratulations to our Student of the Month. Before we head into Mr. Clemenson's riveting, if you,
You're fine.
if you may exit if you'd like, or you may stay if you really want. But thank you very much for your help tonight.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys.
Just a thank you to the troop. They've been very active in the community over the last few years, building momentum and building their troop. Mr. Luce is a leader in that group too, so it's great to have them here each year as they work on it's the civic participation badge. That's great. Okay, time for the riveting superintendent's report. Welcome to April. Last April, we sat in Zoom, zoomed in on our phones and on our computers. It continues to be great to be back. We'll switch over to the presentation on the screen here. We congratulate our Students of the Month, and we'll move into our enrollment update. Today, our kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment stands at 2,042 students, a little up from where we were last month at 2,032 students. We've had a little bit of a dip through, a little bit of a dip and then coming back up to 2,042. Not an alarmingly larger number than we had planned. When you take 10 kids and distribute them over roughly K through 12th grade, 13 grades, again, our enrollment fits well within our capacity. We are in the midst of planning to graduate our seniors and welcome our kindergartners and pre-kindergartners. So now's the time we start our hellos and our goodbyes. And we welcome the class of 2034.
the incoming kindergarten class. Just by way of comparison, at this time last year, April 21st, 2020, we had 95 little ones registered for kindergarten in the class of 2033. That materialized today to 140 kindergartners. So we get the bulk of the kids early, but we also know that there is there's some more settlement that happens in the summertime as parents make their final decisions about whether or not their children are going to kindergarten, where they're going to kindergarten, or what neighborhoods they're going to live in. So we're at 91 registered little ones. My son included. So I'm going to sit on the other side of the table for those parent-teacher conferences now. But we're right in the same ballpark, in line with our enrollment projections. Larry is working with Mr. Abramson, who's done our projectioning and demographics. He's going to refresh our numbers. We do a big refresh every 4 or 5 years or so, so it's time. That'll take a number of months to get done, but we feed him information about we feed him all sorts of records in school about demographics and statistics. He'll be paying attention to the Canoe Place Inn restoration and the condos development and the residential development that is planned across from Red Creek Park, and all sorts of those trends in the neighborhood to make his projections. In our incoming pre-kindergarten class, last Monday, we had our PreK lottery. In 2019-20, we had 54 seats in both Scope and Just Kids. There are 9 students in Just Kids who are placed there by the Committee on Preschool Special Education. And then Just Kids, through a partnership that Mr. Pagano manages, scholarships in another 9 kids in the AM and 9 kids in the PM to make an inclusive pre-kindergarten program. Typically, that's 54 seats that we have the opportunity to fill. In 2021, that number was reduced to 44 seats. Everybody who wanted a seat got one because of just the interest numbers being lower. Next year will be somewhere between 44 and 54. We're not quite sure what September guidelines will look like. We'll know that over the summer. I'm headed to Albany tomorrow to meet with Commissioner on Friday, and a few other meetings on Thursday where the topic will be what is September going to look like. So some of those important conversations are going to happen. We'll hear from our Commissioner of Education and our staff on that. But in the lottery, we have 33 students who have indicated that they're interested. So whether it's 44 on the more conservative end or 54 on the more inclusive end, every child who has registered in the lottery so far is getting a seat in one of these classrooms. So that's good. Then as other kids come in, we'll set these students up in their AMs and PMs at the May meeting through a lottery by drawing in order. And then any other kids that come in will get seats until we don't have seats to give anymore. So that's great news. School bus safety enforcement. I raise this because it's important that the public starts to know what is happening in May. In the 2020 budget, the 2020 New York State budget, New York State passed a law that allows the school buses to have cameras on their stop arms. Passing school buses either in the same direction or in the opposite direction on the other side of the road is an epidemic. COVID's not the only epidemic or pandemic going on. I get calls from, particularly on Montauk Highway, from some business owners who send me videos of cars not stopping. Now, our bus stops are, we only pick up on the side of the road. We're not asking kids to cross Montauk Highway. However, that doesn't change the law. You have to stop when that arm comes out. Squiretown Road, some of the bigger roads, we see this as a little bit more of an epidemic. So the Suffolk County School Bus Safety Program launches May 1st. Bus Patrol is a company that won the bid with the county, and they have been installing and are continuing to install cameras on the bus stop arms in every school district except one in western Suffolk County. So 68 school districts in Suffolk County opted to participate in this program, one did not. So we were one of them. What's going to happen on May 1st, if you don't stop, you are going to get a summons. Like a red light camera in the western part of Suffolk County, it's the same concept. The school district gets no revenue. The school district has no party to this contract other than that the camera is on the bus. The cameras were put on the stop arms for free, and the revenue that comes from the tickets will go to pay for the cameras and be revenue for the county and a little bit for the court processing fees that would be required in Southampton town. So March 1st to April 30th has been a warning and awareness phase. So we'll continue to post. We have some social media graphics we can post in the next week. People might have gotten letters saying you passed school bus on May 1st. This is going to be a problem. If you don't pass school buses when the arm is open, you'll never know this program is in effect. But if you do, the intent is to curb that behavior. So FYI, May 1st, it's coming. The install is nearly complete with Montauk Bus. I spoke to them earlier today. We are feeling more normal by the day. We're far from normal, but we're feeling more and more normal each day. We have some great spring happenings taking place. Last night we had our National Honor Society induction, and a ceremony deferred from last spring and then last fall, and we were able to have our first in-person ceremony yesterday, and it was really a positive ceremony. Socially distanced, it was carefully orchestrated by Ms. Drohan, our advisor, Mr. Richard, Dr. Greenberg, and it was an opportunity for kids to participate in person. A number of them participated remotely by live streaming in. That continues to be a very viable and fine option for families that are not comfortable being back in the school setting just yet. In May, we have the Tri-M Music Honor Society senior recital that's being planned, so more to come on that, but our seniors will be having a virtual recital to showcase their work over the course of the last year. Rotary Interact, our high school club that is a Rotary feeder into the Rotary Club, Rotary International, is having a beach cleanup tomorrow night, followed by pizza. They'll partner down at Pumpwalk Beach with the Rotary Club members. Thursday, we have our Science Research Symposium with our senior class. That is a remote virtual experience that'll be live streamed over Facebook. Those people who don't have Facebook won't be able to see it live, but we'll see it as soon as it's complete on our YouTube channel. So there'll be a Q&A. We'll hear from our seniors, and then next Thursday, April 29th at 6 o'clock, we'll hear from our underclassmen. We typically give the shorter little vignettes of their research, and our seniors really get the showcase for the 4 years of work that they've been engaged in. It's a big senior class of presentations this year, so looking forward to that. And then a congratulations to the Hampton Bays community for being named for the second year in a row as a Best Community for Music Education by the National Association of Music Merchants. It's a national award program. Mr. Carlson worked with the music department to shepherd our application through the process, and it's just a great notch in the belt to again signify the board's support for the arts, the community's support for the arts, and most importantly, the kids who are engaged and do such a great job in our performing arts programs. So I'll take you back to COVID. As normal again as we are still living in our COVID world, and we live in phase 3. We are materializing our promise that phase 3 was going to be a true opening of the valve to the extent that. So what I'd like to do for the next few minutes is talk to you about vaccinations, updated COVID protocols that were released by the CDC and then adopted by New York State Education Department. Mr. Farrar is going to talk about our caseload of COVID cases. We are in a nice position right now. We're excited about that. People doing the right thing. And then we'll move on. Mr. Carlson's going to spend just a little time talking about a grading policy recommendation, and then Mr. Luce will bring us home with the school budget, proposal that leads us to the school budget vote in May. So phase 3 continues to open valve to get any child who wants to come in for in-person education, in-person learning 5 days a week, in school 5 days a week. So we did see our remote numbers drop to Thank you. we saw remote numbers drop from about 25% to about 14%. So we are seeing more kids come back into the building. Fantastic cooperation with our families who are on full remote. We asked them to wait until yesterday, till the beginning of the fourth marking period. We wanted to come back from spring break, bring our hybrid kids who were in on 2 days or 3 days a week in first, make sure we had the right number of barriers and the desk layouts to promote social distancing in the classroom. And then that gave us a little bit of breathing room to say that on the start of the fourth marking period, the additional kids who want to come back from the remote, back home into the setting of school, can do so. So we're really happy to welcome those students back. I'll talk about the layered mitigation strategies that we have in a moment. When we look at the COVID vaccination effort, we had posted this on our social media. We had made this plan, the Board of Education. You remember, members, you said, get ready in case we could be helpful, be helpful. We never knew if that plan was going to materialize because the college popped up, Jones Beach popped up, Stony Brook University popped up, and it was really a street fight in January and February and the beginning of March to get vaccines. April 6th, we held a 585-dose Pfizer vaccination day, and that following Friday, we turned around and did it again for 999 more doses of Moderna. So they were not all Hampton Bays residents, however, most of them were, about half of them were. 77% of the clients were from the East End, from Remsenburg to East Hampton Springs community. So these are people we are working and living with every day. So I was less concerned that they weren't all 11946 because our borders are not, our communities share so much together, so it's important. 51% of the clients, this is a remarkable statistic. 51% of the clients identify as a person of color. People of color are historically underrepresented in public health initiatives, and they're overrepresented in public health statistics of mortality. So we knew that poorer communities and black and brown communities in particular were hit harder initially with COVID. We know that there's a reticence to jump into the vaccination community and the vaccination effort in communities of color nationally. So for the showing last week to be 51% individuals of color is important when you compare it to Long Island. 27% of people who identify as a person of color have gotten a vaccine. In New York State, that number's 38%, and in the United States, it's 35%. So inclusivity, equity, and access is an important hallmark of the Board of Education and continues to be as we do outreach for our community. One thing our leadership team has been debriefing in the days following the vaccination was that there are a number of individuals, as we watched people come through, and they went until after 9 o'clock on that Friday night. At the very end of the day, we saw what we could assume was the labor community. They came from the job site, you can tell. Not during the day so much. So we reached out to Deputy County Executive Lisa Black, and we're brainstorming ideas on how to bring a nighttime event to the school. The school's not used at night. If we did a 5 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night vaccination opportunity, maybe we would get more folks who just can't leave work during the day. They don't work, they don't get paid, and then their family takes a hit. So we're going to give that a shot. We'll see if that changes the numbers. We'll see if there's vaccine available. We use our partnerships. The county's been remarkable. The hospital's been remarkable, so we're going to keep working in that direction. We'll work with Minerva Perez at OLA, and we'll work with Sister Mary Beth at Centro de Corazon, really targeting the labor and service community. The vaccine pod, we focused on our families, so we communicated primarily with our families, as well as restaurant owners in Hampton Bays, pool companies, landscaping companies, contractors. We really went to anybody who we had a relationship with to say, get your crews vaccinated, get your staffs vaccinated if they want. Here's the link. We went to the Beautification, the Civic Association, the Chamber of Commerce, the Historical Society, and a couple of the Hampton-based community Facebook pages. So we really hit it hard, and on both days, all the appointments were gone in less than 24 hours. So they did get scooped up very quickly. So we're very grateful to the partners who you see on the stage there, on the screen. As of April 16th, 50% of our school district is fully vaccinated, meaning they've received their second shot from Moderna or Pfizer, or their one and only shot if it was Johnson & Johnson. So we're approaching that herd immunity in the Hampton-based school district. Moving on, the CDC has updated its guidance for the return to in-person instruction. The CDC requires a continued use of layered mitigation strategies. That's a 5-tiered system. Universal masks, physical distancing, hand washing and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and maintaining healthy facilities, and contact tracing. So knowing where our people are and who they're with and for how long they are with them. So those continue to be the belt, suspenders, elastic around your waist, all the things that keep your pants up. We use all of those strategies to make sure that we're staying healthy as a district. Mr. Farrar's data is going to support that. CDC and the Department of Health have changed physical distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet in most cases without restriction other than masks. However, there are stipulations about community transmission. So New York State, for the most part, all counties remain in a higher transmission zone. And so the requirements there are to cohort when possible. So K to 8, we are cohorted. And then 9 through 12, when we're not cohorted, to communicate with our community and take their assessment of risk. So CDC has eliminated the requirement that barriers are in place. They said you don't need them. We have decided to keep barriers. They've said try to get as best ventilation as you can. We have maximized our ventilation systems to MERV 13 filters in every building, particularly this one where we're not cohorted. Windows are open, doors are open, so the layered mitigation strategy and our communication at every board meeting, our reopening committee that met in March, has put all of these factors on the table, and we've seen a return to in-person instruction in the right way. That valve continues to exist because if the numbers start to move in a different direction that is not favorable, we turn the valve and we move back to a hybrid or some sort of a hybrid if we have to. Schools still have to maintain 6 feet regardless if it's between adults, so we need to remain 6 feet. Between adults and students, they need to remain 6 feet. In physical education and music. So those two places went from 12 feet to 6 feet, which was great. So Mrs. Halsey can have the entire band together for the first time since March 13th, 2020. So louder music is being played now because they're all there together. They're within 6 feet. So I reviewed our reopening plan yesterday to see if we needed to update. The updated plan that was approved by the board and presented to our community and submitted to the Department of Health and Education Department is built in such a way that we don't have to make substantive changes to it. We said we would operate within the guidance, and there are links to the guidance in the plan. Reopening at hbschools.us continues to be the email address for anybody who has questions or comments. It goes to a distribution list where we can all answer that and make sure that communication flows. And then, of course, any individual's teacher, principal, assistant superintendent, myself, where we take phone calls all the time for people who have questions and concerns. So if anyone comes to you, board members, you can feel free to send them to us. What else do I want to say there? Nothing. Okay, I'm going to turn it to Mr. Ferraro for just a few minutes to talk about where we are with COVID numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Clemenson, Mr. Springer, members of the Board of Education. One positive thing, for me at least, that's come out of COVID is lots of data. If you know me, I don't shy away from a spreadsheet if I had a chance. So I'm going to share some information with you tonight that we've kind of been monitoring closely day by day and just kind of encapsulate where we've been and where we're going. So right now, to date, there are 27 individuals in district that are on quarantine. As a point of perspective, in March, we had 206. In February, 201. To date, 1,317 individuals in district have been quarantined in some capacity. Now, as a point of reference, 2,400 kids, adults in this district, and some of those quarantines were due to close contact, some were due to travel restrictions, travel quarantine, so on. We've had 193 cumulative cases. From October was our first case up until just as recently as today. But you can see that number really start in October, climb precipitously up to January, and then we start to really drop. So the graph there on the right is month by month read of average number of cases that we're seeing. So Mike, next slide. With this all, bear in mind that we've opened the valve a lot more. We started off with purple and white days. We started off with 24% of our student population fully remote. To date, we've brought back all the purple and white students, and we also have dropped the remote number down to 14% as of today. So that's a huge, we're really getting close to having everyone fully back in. This graph here is a depiction of, since the first day of school, every tag on that graph is a day of school. And that's the average positivity rate that we've seen. So we ran through October with 0 because we had no cases, and then it started to climb. We hit our peak in really February, and now we're starting to drop quickly. This is average number of cases that we're seeing per day. I can tell you that in January, we were facing 3.5 cases on average a day. So right now, last week, I think we had one positive case, which is a huge thrust in the right direction. Mike, next slide, please. This is the same graph. The red axis is the same, but this gives you a more accurate look at what's going on. Those, the blue chunks of space there, that's a week's time, how many cases we've seen in a week, so per day in a week. So you can really see it start to climb, and it doesn't stop. January is at our peak. That's the Christmas break. We saw that huge surge, and now we're dropping, like I said, 1 case last week, I think 1 this week also. So we're in a good place. We're in the right direction. We've brought more people in, so everything's going the right way. Any questions at all? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
He does love his data, so this is like a game for him to plot it out in the best way. But he chose that mountain, and last month we didn't have that as much of that downward curve. So as Ms. Farrar said, with each day we see we're moving in the right direction. Tonight you're going to, board members, vote on a recommendation to amend the grading policy. So we amended the grading policy for last April, to get through the COVID pandemic. We thought we'd be 2 weeks back, and now we realize that we need additional amendments to the policy. So Mr. Carlson has been working with the team to make that recommendation. So we'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Clemenson. As you can see on the slide, that State Ed had applied for waivers with the U.S. Department of Education. Those waivers were denied for assessments as they were last year. And the U.S. Department of Education is requiring that we do a minimal amount of testing. So as you can see this past week, we had our first running of the ELAs and those shortened exams. And they follow suit with the Regents exams where they've cut them down to having us to be required to administer 4 Regents exams. They'll be offered in person. They will not be offered remotely. However, just like we're doing with our AP exams, students can elect, if they are remote, to come in and take these exams in person. Those 4 exams are algebra, earth science, living environment, and English. Our foreign language checkpoint A, which is given in the middle school, and checkpoint B, which is given in the high school, those will not be offered. Our August Regents have been canceled as well. So students that have a cumulative average of 65 or higher that are passing in June, will be exempt from taking the Regents that are offered, as well as those that would have culminated in a Regents exam as well. This also includes the Checkpoint A and the Checkpoint B. No local finals will be given, so we won't have, go ahead, Rich.
Excuse me, were the 4 exams chosen by the state or by?
They were chosen by the state.
Oh,
Those
by
were
the
the,
state. And why were August canceled?
similar to last summer, a student, if they failed the course, they have the opportunity to go to summer school. If they pass summer school in those courses, they earn the exemption.
Oh, okay.
But they only required us, and I'm sure it has something to do with the federal law that we're required to offer them in the culmination of the year, but not during summer school.
Thank you.
So again, if students are passing at the end of the school year, they'll get an exemption. If they are not passing, they will not earn that exemption. No local finals will be given. We will send out what our finals week will look like for both the high school and the middle school after this consideration. We do see the value in some summative assessments that will be given in class, but only if it's in a productive nature, not for some, as a regular practice. So for instance, we have a Science 7 class that would lead into a living environment class, and it would be valuable for us to know what are they leaving Science 7th with before they go into their living environment Regents course in 8th grade. So that's an example of where we would give a cumulative or summative assessment in class, and that would be counted as consistent with other tests that are given in the 4th quarter. So the proposed grading policy that we're asking to the board to consider is that in grades 5 through 7, each quarter would be counted as 25% of the full year course. And if it's a half year course, then each quarter would be counted as 50%. In grades 8 through 12, each quarter would count as 25% for a full year course, 50% for half year courses, except with the following case. And we are establishing a hold harmless policy because we want to encourage students to give this assessment or these Regents exams that are offered a try. We've tried very, very hard through our staff. Our teaching staff has done an amazing job of finding focus standards that are priorities within each one of these courses. We've done this in a very smart manner and used past Regents exams to focus specifically on high leverage areas that we believe that we should have focused on since the beginning of the year. And we created these scope and sequences that were amended and submitted and reviewed in the fall. If a student elects to complete one or more of the 4 Regents exams offered, as listed before, and their score on the Regents exam is greater than their 4-quarter average, the final course grade will be comprised of each quarter counting 20% and the Regents grade counting as the additional 20%. If a student completes a Regents exam and the score achieved is not greater than the 4-quarter average, the student will receive their 4-quarter average as their final grade. So there, again, is a hold harmless policy, and again, that we would encourage students to give this exam a try, that there really isn't any way to hurt their average in doing so. Also want to note that typically the Regents exam score is automatically put onto a transcript. The state ed has allowed us not to do that automatically. So every student who passes at the end of the year will get the exemption. If they take the Regents exam, that score, they can choose to have it appear on their transcript if they do well. If they don't do well, then it remains in our local data bank and not placed on the child's transcript. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Carlson?
I do have a question. What about past Regents exams? Would that grade still stay on their transcript or only from now on?
Just for these 4 exams, just for this year. Yep. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So speaking of Regents exams and finals gets us thinking about June, so we'll have more information. What's on everybody's mind is what is commencement going to look like, what is senior prom going to look like, what's the last day of classes. All of those things are in development right now. We've gone back and forth even in the last week on whether or not it's 2 commencement ceremonies, whether it's the Friday or the Saturday. We're sensitive to the fact that families need to make arrangements for people who might be traveling in. We're going to ask the community to be sensitive to balancing many needs in case there are capacity requirements to how many guests each graduate could have. We're working with our senior class officers who are we're charging with the responsibility of taking the pulse of the senior class. You want multiple ceremonies? Do you want one ceremony to be together? Where do your priorities lie? And then what does that mean for us in terms of how many people we can gather? What are the testing and vaccination requirements? So we're not quite ready for a full presentation of that yet, but I'll take in questions on it. We are looking at having the bridge parade for the community again. Using the tent for prom potentially, with some dance space outside of the prom, using the field, working with our local restaurants to invest in them and have them cater our prom. We're working, those are all some of the ingredients that are in the mix right now. But if there's any questions on the end of the year, if I can answer them now, I will.
Do you know when you're going to have the answers?
I would say within 10 days. Within 10 days, we should have, with the asterisk that we've put on everything since March of 2020, subject to change. But we'll give everybody the best guess that we can. Okay, so it's April tonight. We're going to, as a board, we are presenting to you the recommendation to approve a budget proposal for the 2021-22 school year. And from there, that brings us one step closer to the Tuesday, May 18th budget vote. So what I'm going to do is start with the state budget overview, because so much that happened in Albany is driving what is happening in our local budget this year in a way that our resident historian, Mr. Joslin, I'm not even sure you'll remember ever being in our favor before like it is this time. Then Larry will take us home with our local budget proposal. Then we'll answer any questions, public comment for those who are watching. Use the chat and your YouTube on the YouTube function, and we will answer those as at the end of the presentation. So the state funding situation improved. That's the short answer. The revenue outlook improved faster than anticipated at the beginning of COVID. So initially at the beginning of COVID, when the state was projecting big dips in its tax revenue collection, the state and leading economists were projecting that we would not see pre-pandemic economic recovery until about 2023. However, New York State is on the way to that now. We're seeing that with real estate boom. We're seeing busy restaurants. The tourism economy is coming back. It's not to say that people did not feel significant pain, but it is improving faster than the government had anticipated it would, and so that's a good thing. That led to a $1.4 billion increase in foundation aid, and that's the key driver for state aid in New York State, state aid to schools in New York State. That is probably the most significant investment in increasing foundation aid since its beginning in 2007, 2008. That is a major investment in public education. So we thank our legislators. I thank you board members for being present with Senator Val when he served, and now Senator Palumbo, Assemblyman Thiel, and making sure that whether it's through New York State school boards or Nassau-Suffolk school boards, or the work that you're doing in the community, you're telling the story of Hampton Bays and making sure that they know education is a top priority. They delivered on that this year, so that the response to our elected officials is thank you. Significant investment in an expansion of full-day pre-kindergarten, increases in other aids like transportation aid, high-cost aid, BOCES aid, other smaller, $445 million is a lot of money, but it's some of the smaller aids that were generated in Albany. And then there was also additional state-funded property tax relief. So that was happening up 95 and up Route 87 in Albany. Down Route 95 in Washington, another series of bills was being passed, an investment to re-stimulate the economy from COVID, and that was the federal stimulus and COVID relief packages that have been passed. In December, the federal government passed a $3.85 billion relief package called CRISA. We like our acronyms, so that's CRISA funding. And then in March, the government passed an nearly an $8.1 billion American Rescue Plan, ARPA. So CRISA and ARPA. Some of that money goes directly to school districts to use, and there is a list of allowable expenses for what can be used, and there's an allowable time frame in which they can be used. What does that mean? That means that money expires. That means that it is not a regular funding source like foundation aid is. It is a relief. It is intended to make improvements to your facilities. It is intended to address learning loss recovery from the closure and the hybrid learning and remote learning that kids may have fallen behind in. It is not meant to be recurring expenses, and the federal money is not meant to be property tax relief. That is actually written in the legislation. So we get our instructions from this, and we're told that we should be looking at one-time expenses for the item I just mentioned. Mr. Jocelyn.
What's the time limit on spending it?
So we got roughly $1.9 million in federal funding. I'll leave Larry to talk about the state funding. $1.9 million in ARPA federal funding. We have 3 school years to use that. Learning loss recovery, facilities improvements in ventilation, air conditioning, ventilation systems. Knowing that when we faced a global health pandemic, the number one concern was ventilation. Many schools are old across the nation, and so that was a priority of the federal government. In order to spend this money, we will convene a stakeholders group about this. We will post our plans on the website. We will seek feedback from the public. We will be transparent in how we spend this money. So we don't see this as a blank check. In fact, it's not blank. It's 1.8 million or so to be used in 3 years. So again, non-recurring expenses, why is it important? Because at the end of 3 years, you fall off the cliff. The money's not there. So if you bought new programs and new teachers and funded those in 3 years, if you don't have a way to replace that funding, it dries up. We don't want to be in that situation. Where did all this money come from? So if we go to the state budget good news slide, and you know if there's a good news slide, the one after that is what's the bad news? So the good news slide is this money came from a number of sources. So the first time in what we can remember is that there's a lot of money that the state is investing in public education. The state budget increased $3.5 billion, primarily through tax increases. Income tax increases on the wealthy. So individuals earning $1 million or those filing jointly earning $2 million, they will have their taxes increased a little less than 1%. 2 additional personal income tax brackets were added by the legislature. Income over $5 million will be taxed at a little over 10%, and income over $25 million will be taxed at just under 11%. So the $25 million $1 that you make as a kindergarten teacher, Annie, will be taxed at a higher rate than the $24 million that you earned before that. These personal income tax expenses that were increased will expire after 2027. So there's your first little blip on the radar to be cautious. That 2027 seems like a long time away, but it's not a long time away. Remember, our current kindergartners are the class of 2033. So it gives us caution to say this additional money that is coming into New York State will expire long before these kindergartners graduate. We've got to be very careful with how we use it. We don't want to get doe-eyed about all this money and let's do X, Y, and Z. We have to be cautious about how to do that. There are corporate franchise tax increases as well for businesses who make over $5 million. That has an expiration date as well. The budget authorizes mobile sports betting and legalization of marijuana. So there's this projected revenues that are driving these formulas that are generating money for us. The next slide, caution and risk though. So the budget also includes $12.6 billion in temporary state relief from Washington, D.C. At some point in the future, that federal aid will be exhausted. There's open questions about whether the state tax increases will have negative effects on the New York economy. What happens when they expire? What happens with the New York City economy? City residents between 2011 and 2018 accounted for 55% of New York's gross income. They accounted for 71% of the state's job growth between 2011 and 2020. The pandemic drove a lot of people out of the city and out of the state to work remotely. It's uncertain what's going to happen with those businesses. Many will come back. New York is New York around the world. But there will be a factor of impact. We just don't know what that is. So again, waving that red flag, that blinking light, just reminding you on the dashboard, be cautious, you know, we want to be careful about that. And there's also a Supreme Court case, New Hampshire versus Massachusetts, which challenges the state's state income tax for workers who work remotely out of state. So you can see probably Boston workers went to their country house into New Hampshire. They're not working in Massachusetts anymore. So you have some caution and risk out there on the horizon. When we look at foundation aid, which is the primary driver of state aid, I'll give just a quick primer on this. People spend their entire careers trying to master this, so we'll see what we can do in one slide. Essentially, foundation aid is a formula that is generated in the state, at the state level, that determines the cost to educate a successful student. It adjusts for changes in consumer price index from year to year. It adjusts for regional cost factor, understanding that the price to educate, the price to live, the price to do business on Long Island is different than the southern tier or in the central part of New York. It also incorporates changes and enhancements in aid for sparsity and local need like poverty and English language learners. So if you have more factors that cost more to educate a child, typically the foundation aid formula would generate more money for your school district. So on paper, that formula was beautiful, right? It took into account a local ability to pay. It took into account the local demographic and landscape. And then the state said, when it costs more to educate a child because of certain factors, we'll chip in a little bit more, less on the property taxpayer. The problem was how that materialized. The state never fully funded that formula. And therefore, as districts' demographics changed, in Hampton Bays particularly, we had an increase in a number of our English language learners, an increase in a number of our students experiencing economic disadvantage and poverty. So our fully funded number started to take off like a train, and we couldn't catch it because of the state's level of investment into the foundation aid. So we became 43% fully funded, 42% fully funded, and we settled at 40% fully funded. So this budget was a game changer. Senator Shelley Mayer, the chair of the Education Department, the chair of the Education Committee in the New York Senate, led this battle to increase foundation aid. Assemblyman Thiel has been fighting this battle for years to bring the lowest funded school districts for foundation aid up to 60%. So school districts in the state budget got their foundation aid increase in one of four ways. For those who were fully funded already, they got 2%. There was a phase-in if you were anywhere between 60% and 100% fully funded. And if you were under 60% fully funded by any amount, 59%, or like Hampton Bays, 40.6%, you got a boost up to 60%. For Hampton Bays, it was an additional $2 million that was not anticipated. Larry, in January, did not anticipate another dollar from the governor's budget. We built our budget in that way, and $2 million more showed up. So that's foreshadowing for Larry's bullet points that he's going to talk about. The best of the four formulas is what each school district got. We got a catch-up provision. Hampton Bays had the largest school aid increase on Long Island, a 43% increase. We were fourth from the bottom in New York State. So the storytelling, the advocacy, the work that we've put in over the last 10 years has paid off. The budget language calls for this formula to be fully funded in 3 years. So we could presume that if everything continued moving in the right direction, next year we're 60% fully funded for state aid, the following year we're 80% fully funded for state aid, and then the third year we're 100% fully funded. Now that's written, and as we know, over the bridge is Ponquag Beach, and if you write something in sand and the wave comes, what happens? We trust our legislators have the best intentions about prioritizing public education, but there are a lot of factors out there that we just can't see around the corner just yet. I'm going to skip this next slide, Andy, and you can move to the school budget proposal slide, and we'll cue up Mr. Luce as I wrap up here. So as I welcome Mr. Luce to present the parameters of the school budget proposal, everything that I just mentioned over the last 5 or 10 minutes has been baked into this proposal. We started with the goal of staying at or under the tax cap, preserving the programs that are valuable to us, not laying off people who still need to be working for us, so no reductions in force and reductions in program, and don't dip into the reserves. Don't start spending, don't go grocery shopping with your savings account, so to speak, for recurring expenses. All of that was our driving value statement to craft this budget. I'll turn it over to Mr. Luce.
Thank you, Mr. Clemenson. Board members, Bayman, tonight it is my pleasure for the first time in 15 years to propose and present to you a budget that brings with it a zero school property tax levy. It's something I honestly didn't think I'd ever see working in schools, because the normal process is the budget creeps up a little and the tax levy creeps up a little. But this year is unique. This year we are able to say that we believe we can have a zero property tax levy increase. We believe that that will result in taxpayers actually seeing a slight school property tax decrease in Hampton Bays. The reason for that is new construction in the last year has increased the assessed value of the overall district by about $22 million. That in turn drives the tax rate down just a little bit, and yet there was no reassessment in Southampton town. So all of those folks who had existing homes, their tax rate will drop just a little bit, and they should see next year an actual decrease in your school property taxes. Probably nothing to go buy a new car or a vacation condo with. Probably it'll be in the range of $20 to maybe $200, but it will be a tax decrease for the first time. Our tax cap this year would have allowed us to increase school property taxes 1.1%. But as Mr. Clemenson, the board, and I have said all along, we will tax when we need to for what we need to. And because of the way the foundation formula is changed, because of state aid for next year, and because of what we are able to do, there is no need to tax more, and thus we will not. The proposed budget for next year is a rather large increase. It's 3.8%. It'll bring our school budget up nearly just over $2.1 million to $57.3 million. And I will explain how we go through that on the next slide and end up with the zero tax levy. Andy? So, as I said, our tax revenue, our property taxes, our tax levy will not increase. We asked for $48,286,000 this year. We will ask for $48,286,000 next year, zero increase. Our local revenue this year was $472,000. This is tuitions that we charge from a couple students that come from out of district to Hampton Bay schools. This is facilities use. This is premium we get on our tan. Not a lot of money. We project it'll be about the same for next year, $472,000. And then the big difference is in our state aid. We projected for this year we would have $6.4 million in state aid. That included that foundation aid that Mr. Clemenson spoke about. We are told by the state lawmakers in Albany that next year our state aid will be just over $8.5 million, or roughly a 32.8% increase, $2.1 million more in state aid. And when we look at the budget, our plan is to take that $2.1 million, invest it in the budget, cover what would be our normal operating expenses for next year, and then use the additional money to address some capital needs. In addition to the foundation aid and state aid that we'll be getting next year, there's also an addition to our pre-kindergarten grant. This year we received about $89,000 for pre-kindergarten, and that has been a static number for at least the last 10 years. Next year we will receive just over $310,000 for our pre-kindergarten grant, which allows us to open up that program, provide more services to more children in the community. We haven't yet figured out how to do that. It's literally been about 2 weeks since this was announced, but we're working on it, and we do anticipate having programs for next year. Next slide, please. To look at this graphically over the last 10 years, in 2011-12, you see that our tax levy increase percent was just a bit over 5%. And then the tax cap came into place in 2012-13. And since then, our average tax levy increase has been just a hair over 2%, 2.02. And then you run all the way out to the right side of that slide, and you look at the tax levy increase for 2021-22, and there's no bar there, because the tax levy increase for 2021-22 is zero. It doesn't exist. Conversely, in our budget over the last 10 years, you can see that the average budget has been around 2.5% increase. Our budget for next year, for 2021-22, is projected to be about a 3.8% increase, using that state aid that's coming in next year. Next slide. And what allows us to do that is the slide on the left here shows our state aid as a percentage of our budget. And you can see back in 2011-12, our state aid was only about 9% of our budget. And over the last 10 years, thanks to advocacy from the board, from the superintendent, our state aid has crept up a little bit at a time. It's averaging now right around 11% of our budget. But again, as Mr. Clemenson was explaining, with the things going on in the state budget and the state recognizing that we were well behind in foundation aid, next year should be a large increase in foundation aid, and it will translate to our state aid being just under 15% of our budget. Next slide, please. So it's a unique year next year. Fiscally, something you don't see very often in your career. We're going to have a $2.1 million budget increase and a zero tax levy increase. And where we plan to use the money in that, obviously, is first our normal operating expenses. But then we looked at, well, how could we be conservative and how could we be cautious about using this? We didn't want to add a bunch of programs. We didn't want to create a bunch of things that would be ongoing expenses that would get used, that would use up the state aid, and then if that state aid was not repeated in future years, would leave us in a position to either have to cut a program we just put in place or tax to support something that's brand new. And what we realized was we have a number of areas around the district that need normal maintenance, repair, attention. And these would end up being something we would come to the community, to the Bayman for in a bond, maybe in 2 years from now or 3 years from now. But with the state aid money, we could take care of, or at least get the plans in place to take care of next year. So we're going to look to repair and reline and resurface the high school track. The track's 12 years old right now. When it was put in 2008, we were told that within 10 years we would have to do a resurfacing and a maintenance project on it. We've never done it. It's time to do it. The high school locker room has been talked about, both boys and girls, as a project that's been on the board's list, that's been on Mr. Walker's list for probably 3 or 4 years, I think, maybe more. We're going to look to get the high school locker rooms redone. The softball and baseball infields are great, but have one critical flaw, and that's the weather. Unfortunately, in the spring, we deal with a lot of rain, and it delays the game from being played the day it rains, but it also delays the game from being played for the next 2 or 3 days because puddles and mud just seem to linger around. Our proposal is to do those 2 infields for the varsity teams in turf, similar to what the town has done up at Red Creek Park, where the Little League and the softball field have turf on the infield. It allows the games to be played within an hour of the rain stopping because the drainage is so good. We also have maintenance to do on the tennis court. We'd like to get that maintenance done and get it repainted and restriped. And last but not least, when we're working on the elementary school roof, which is also something we're about to talk about in the budget proposal, we'd like to get the flashing work done on the cornice on the front of the elementary school where it leaks in a very hard driving east rain. Next slide, please. Our school budget as a whole, the summary of it, in general support services, we see just a 2.1% increase. Really, it's a carryover budget, except for we'd like to add 1 full-time maintenance mechanic to the staff. In instruction, increase is about a 2.4% increase. Again, largely a maintenance budget. 2 new positions required. One a Spanish teacher, and the second a ENL teacher. These are just driven by numbers of students and needs that they have. The other addition we'd like to make is we have a nurse who is a 3/4 nurse. She only works for us 75% of the time. We'd like to change that to be a full-time nurse. During COVID, I think our nurses became one of our most valuable resources, and having the 4th nurse be truly here full-time really would help out the school district in a number of ways. We're going to try to make it so that nurse, or one of the 4 nurses, is on later in the afternoon to like 4:30 or 5 o'clock, so that if there's a need later in the day from sports or some other emergency that occurs, as a medical professional here on site. And then the big increase in the budget would be in the capital projects. We'd see about a 6.4% increase in that area, and it would be all of those projects I listed on the previous slide. Next slide, please. Yes, Mr. Joslin?
Going back to the capital projects, the fact that we're getting this extra money allows us to complete these projects without proposing any bonds in the future.
Correct.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Absolutely. These projects would be done at no additional cost to the Bayman taxpayer. And it would absolve us of having to do them, as Mr. Joslin pointed out, maybe 2-3 years down the road, and having to float a bond to do them, which then would be a tax on the Bayman taxpayer. So it really resolves a bunch of issues quickly and at no additional cost to Hampton Bays, which is great.
Thank you.
Budget information for voting. If you would like an absentee ballot, the absentee ballot application is in that link right up there on the slide. If you would like to come vote in-person voting is May 18th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the middle school gym. And if you are voting in person, we remind you, please bring your mask. COVID precautions will be taken, including masks, hand sanitizer, wiping down voting booths, wiping down pens and things like that that are used by multiple people. There are 3 propositions on the budget ballot. The first is for the school budget, $2.1 million budget increase, 0 tax levy increase. Second proposal is to use $3.5 million from our roof HVAC reserve, which we created back in 2019. We would replace the elementary school roof, which, if you recall, last spring had an issue in a windstorm. The roof, quite a bit of the roof on the gym peeled back. We had it repaired. The roofing contractor said to us that it's solid for now, but that it really needs to be replaced. We would replace that roof, $3.5 million project. Impact to Hampton Bays taxpayers, increase, 0. We've already saved the money to do the job.
And this is the 1997-98 roof, the areas of the...
Correct. This is
So
the
we're gonna-
1997-98 areas of the roof of the elementary school.
So by the time it's done, 23, 24 years old.
Yep. And then the last proposition is to authorize the use of up to $300,000 of funds left over from this school year's budget, if we have it, to continue to do upgrades and renovations to facilities and grounds, similar to what we did in the high school library 2 summers ago. Again, impact to Hampton Bays taxpayer, 0 tax increase.
That's,
Mr. Joslin?
that 300,000, that's separate from the other.
Separate from the other, yes, absolutely, yep. Also on the ballot on budget vote night, there'll be 3 people running for 2 positions on the Board of Education. Incumbents Ann Culhane and Liz Scully, and retiring teacher Mr. Richard Iannelli. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just some important dates about school budget to keep in mind. May 4th will be our budget hearing, which will be done through Zoom or Facebook. At that date, May 4th, budget information will be available for review in the library and in the schools and online. May 8th, our budget newsletter will go out. May 11th will be our normal board meeting and UPK lottery. May 12th, the 6-day budget notice will go out. May 13th is the last day for the clerk to mail an absentee ballot or for someone to register to vote. After that, if you want an absentee ballot, you'd have to actually come to the clerk's office and fill out an application and request it. May 18th is our annual vote, meeting and budget vote. And June 15th is the day I don't want to talk about because it means that the first budget failed and we have to do a revote. So we're just going to forget that June 15th exists for right now. In conclusion, I ask everyone, I ask all Baymen, please come vote. The biggest concern I have with a zero tax levy increase is folks say, it's not going to impact me, my taxes are going to go down or be zero, I don't need to worry about this. We must worry about this, we must vote. If we don't vote, even though it would be a zero budget or zero tax levy increase in contingency, we would have contingency restrictions that still make it harder for us to operate as a school. So please come vote. Thank you very much, board members. Mr. Clemenson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you to Lars and all who have put in a tremendous amount of time and effort to get us where we are today, not just through the budget, but through meetings in Albany and anywhere else we could be. With that, we will move on to business and finance, and we're going to do a consent agenda from 4A to 4G.
If I could just jump in, at 4F, we're accepting a donation from Mr. Richard Weinstock, a member of the East End community renovating his home. He's donating a beautiful grand piano, which we understand was in the original Metropolitan Opera House. So the middle school is excited, went and checked it out and is excited to take the donation and put it in our music program. So thank you to Mr. Weinstock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need a motion for 4A to 4G. I need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Student services, just 5A, I need a motion.
Motion.
I need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Personnel, we will do a consent from 6A to 6J unless anybody has any questions or concerns.
I'll just flag acceptance of resignation. The number of people have left us or moved to two different positions. Congratulations to Nancy Bowden and Morgan Brown, who both are assuming office assistant positions at the elementary school and the high school guidance office, and congratulations to Jeff Tina and Drew Walker, who have decided to retire after a career in the Hampton-based schools. So we'll celebrate them in the coming months, but we'll recognize them tonight and say thank you.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion, please. I need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda from 7A to 7G. Unless anybody has any...
Motion. Oops, sorry.
I'll just flag in this consent package, you're approving the first reading of the proposed grading policy change that Mr. Carlson presented tonight, the adoption of the 2021-22 proposed budget, the proposition for the ballot in May. What we probably should do, Mrs. Pandolfo, though, is maybe consent through D, and then do two separate motions for the BOCES budget and Board of Education, which we're voting on tonight as well. An under 2% increase in BOCES. We use BOCES for career and technical education, some special education services, and a number of administrative and cooperative bidding functions.
Okay, so we will do a consent agenda from 7A to 7D, correct?
Yes.
And then I need a motion. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we can do E and G together, or
Do E and F
E and F together?
together, and then G.
Okay, so I need a consent agenda motion on 7E and F. I need a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We will do 7G on its own. I need a motion. That's the approval of the extracurricular charters. I need a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Public comments. Persons may address the Board of Education on any matters of interest or concern. Board President will recognize all speakers. Time limits may be imposed based upon agenda needs.
We have two.
Okay.
Ms. Dino Caballero, listening to the budget presentation, indicated that this was very interesting. Thank you for participating in the presentation and following us through. Mr. Iannelli it reminds us that tomorrow is Administrative Professionals Day and thanks those folks in our district. We can't do what we do without their efforts.
Okay.
Those look like the only two comments that we have.
Okay. With that being said, I need a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Motion?
I need a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.